Right, shall we start? We're on. Thanks all for coming. So my name is Levine. I work at UK Music. UK Music is the umbrella body for the commercial music industry. So we represent everyone from sort of labels, managers and artists. And actually, quite topical, we did make a game this year called Music Inc. With Aardman Animations. But this panel know far more about games, so I will stop talking. So the title of this panel, The Importance of Audio in Video Games and How It's Changing the Music Industry's Relationship with Gaming. So I'm just going to go along the panel and introduce our panelists. Sergio, do you want to start?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Sergio Pimentel. I'm a music supervisor at Big Sync Music. We work predominantly on advertising, although I've got a lot of video game clients. My background was in advertising and video games, music licensing, and also dealing with composers and getting commissioned scores. So I was at PlayStation for 5.5 years, and then at Activision for 3 years. Then I set up my own company for 3 years, working on both ads and games, and I joined Big Sync at the beginning of this year.
Thanks. Joan?
Hello, my name is Joan. I'm working on Ubisoft Barcelona from 2000, so I have 14 years of experience. I'm audio designer, so my role in the team is to make audio be important in the game, and designed audio solutions to have the most important feedback, the most important sonorization, and the most important role of audio in the game. I have worked on several projects like Time, like Driver, like Just Recon, and my last game is Rabbits Interactives, based in the interactive series of television. And that's all for this. I'm here today.
Stephan?
Hi, I'm Stephan Leonhard. I work in the sync team at Kobalt Music Publishing, and I do international sync. So day to day I work with film and advertising syncs in foreign territories, including Spain, where we've recently done the Repsol ad with the Hives. We did 2 of the Movistar campaigns this year, and then a campaign for a political party as well. So the music, basically, that we licensed for that. And I've obviously been briefed by my colleagues who are the games experts too. Yeah.
Thank you. So to start, I think the best thing, let's have a think about kind of what has changed. We know a lot has changed, but maybe, Joan, you could come in here and talk about over the last, I mean, what you say you've been at Ubisoft for 14 years. So in those 14 years, kind of what's changed, and yeah.
Yeah, exactly. 14 years is a big period of time in the game industry because things happen very fast. Technology evolves very quickly, year after year, even project after project. For example, I remember having a budget of 4 megs of RAM dedicated to audio, sound effects, and music for Driver next parallel lines. And for example, now in the next-gen consoles like Xbox One or PS4, we have a lot of memory, we have a lot of streaming bandwidth to do what we want, maybe what we desire, according to the design and according to what we want to communicate in the game. So technologically spoken, fortunately, things has changed, has evolved. Things are making possible to convergence between film music production and game music production. So now we don't have any limit to make this convergence and to spread the new ways of communication and the new ways of developing games. And for example, this is not only the case of audio, things are evolving as well in all the fields related to video game production, from game design, trying to find new ways of tell things and make better experiences. So, well, I think we are now in a good moment of technology, and we have freedom, we have the possibilities to do absolutely new things and make games more immersive to create best gaming experiences.
And do you think at the moment sort of the pace of change is kind of slowing, or do you think where we are now is really exciting and that's kind of where a lot of work is being done?
Absolutely. I think it's very exciting period of the history of video games because they are new things that they are very near of us. For example, virtual reality is a new development that it's very new and it's very recent, but we have the possibility to have this kind of new form of immersion that it will be produce new ways of tell the stories, immerse more the player. Of course, a part of that, not from the technological point of view, we have new experiences, like for example, musicians, bands are developing games for promote and even for release their latest albums. For example, I don't know if you know that, for example, the dubstep producer Skrillex has released recently a video game to release his latest album. So I'm excited about the historical moment we are living right now.
And yeah, that's certainly something that I think we're going to touch on a little bit. So Sergio, do you want to talk about what you think is changing, or how that's kind of changing your, the impact, well, how where we are now and what the kind of changes over the last sort of decade has meant for the job that you're doing now and how that has changed?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this now for 14 years. I remember getting into it at the beginning. There was slight paranoia from from the games companies and from the music companies. Everyone thought that the other one was trying to rip the other one off. And things have changed hugely in that time. I mean, there's been the growth of the music game, which has done a lot for music catalogues, bringing old catalogues back to the fore, new audiences, remuneration through the advances and the royalty deals on these music games that are fairly typical. The minute that the content of the game is music and the game can't really operate without it, you tend to see royalty deals rather than buyouts. So, I was lucky enough to work on one of the first in Europe. So I was at PlayStation when we launched SingStar, and I was there for 5.5 years. There was Guitar Hero over in the US. The guys at Ubisoft have done an amazing job with Just Dance, that's using a lot of great catalogue. And these games have become very popular. So I think that sort of movement into the sort of music gaming space definitely did a lot to bring both industries together. I think, because technology moves so quickly. I mean, I recount a story of working on SingStar going from PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3, where, there were some fairly big differences in that, you're going to be able, there's a download store, you can download individual songs now, You can upload a 30-second clip of your performance onto My SingStar Online, and other players can view it and can comment on it and can score you. I won't name particular names, but I remember going in to see a very, very big UK artist management team that we'd worked with a lot over the years on SingStar. No problems, always got approvals through. And we were moving on to the PlayStation 3, and it got declined, and I couldn't quite get my head around it. I knew the management very well. So I said, look, do you mind if I come in? I'll bring a console, I'll bring the game, I'll basically demo it to you. I promise I won't sing, because I usually get thrown out of offices when I try and do that. But I got there, and I demoed it to them, and I showed them, the iToy camera filming my performance and me uploading my performance. And within seconds, they said, oh, no, that's fine. And I said, okay, well, what did you think we were trying to do? He said, oh, the way it was presented to us was like My SingStar Online was a bit like YouTube. We thought your consumers were going to be able to put our artists' videos up there, basically rape and pillage copyright. Okay, no. So, there's a lot of explanation, I think, that's had to go on over the last 10, 14 years. You know, as I say, technology moves so quickly, you need to be fairly transparent about what you're doing, because depending on the format, you know, the physical, releasing a game on a disc versus digital, so many different rights come into being. And that's probably the big difference is the current gen, so PS4, Xbox One, Wii U less so. But you know, the current gen have got some really exciting new capabilities. You know, the PS4 has got a share button. You can share gameplay and post it up, or you can actually, with some of the games, you can play with a friend of yours that doesn't own the game. And when you're using anything that's got music in it and music copyrights, those kind of things will prove to be a bit challenging, you know. Sharing of a game, your friend would have bought that game previously, and that would have been another sale, another advance, another royalty stream, and all of a sudden you're sharing. So whilst we've got some really exciting stuff going on with the current gen, every new step in technology, there are challenges which they throw up, because creativity always wants to move forward, and you're doing all of that within the constraints of copyright.
Well, I mean, and I think that's a really interesting point, and as you say, you know, with sort of, if we're thinking about how that's changing the role or the gaming world's relationship with the music industry, the copyright side, obviously, that's exactly that. I mean, even removing sort of music games, but thinking more about your Grand Theft Autos and all of those. I mean, Stephan, how do you think, or how is kind of that changing things on the sort of publishing side, certainly in terms of what you guys are doing?
What, the recent...
Yeah, just in terms of kind of now, you know, if music in a game has got a whole sort of new audience, it's giving bands a new audience, it's kind of opening up a whole new kind of world for artists and for music. Is that kind of changing your sort of view of things in terms of on the publishing side?
Oh, absolutely, I think it has. I think so. Well, a good couple of years ago, there was this almost a question of, you know, how now that, you know, people were free to access kind of whichever songs they wanted online whenever they wanted, would anyone be interested in, say, a broadcaster kind of choosing music for them? And I think in that space, you know, games have stepped in and provided kind of a soundtrack for a targeted demographic that can then kind of buy into that sound and share that with anyone else who is also into that particular game franchise. And I think that has just added a lot of value to, you know, the artists as well, and brought them a fan base, which I think they're very appreciative of, and definitely has meant a lot to them.
And perhaps we'll go on to that a little bit more, but maybe, I mean, on that side, in terms of the sort of composition side, Joan, do you want to talk a little bit about the sort of composition? I mean, how has kind of media composing, or sort of, you know, composing for games changed over the last couple of years on the audio side for you?
Yeah, from composition point of view, has evolved a lot. For example, it's frequent that Hollywood composers delivered by Steams the music to be edited and finally mixed. In certain way, this is the same situation right now. Even, for example, in some games like Guitar Hero, Rock Band, licensed music is delivered by tracks as well. So this is from point of view of technical things. But composition means a lot of new things. One of them is try to create adaptive music, which is a little surprising thing, because normally people don't take care about the interactivity or the adaptive music, because if the adaptive music is well done, it's transparent for the user, for the player, so he can notice it. So the thing is how to evolve the composition techniques to do the same thing like in film, in order to make rising, make falling of tension and emotion arcs, in order to storytelling, in order to describe characters. So yes, this is evolving and it makes new challenges for composers dedicated to video game music, but that from the point of view of user, it has been very transparent, and probably the user cannot notice the complexity of composition, the complexity of adaptive music. Even we can link direct feedbacks of the player from pressing buttons in a gamepad to gestures when we are using Kinect or motion tracking devices. So for me, the freedom as well that offers to be composition on video games, it's far away of what films can offer to composition. It's a very, very special technique and special ways of composing in order to have a grade of control, in order to what is adaptive, what is being triggered by the user can be very fluent and very transparent for the user.
Thank you. And I suppose, Sergio, do you think that the soundtrack, if we're not so much on the sort of, as you say, the sort of adaptive music, but, you know, this, as you talk about the, you know, the Chicago song, or whatever that might be, we'll tell you later. You know, whatever, you know, is now the soundtrack more important, you know, just as important, more important, or, you know, are you sort of, do you think that that's now completely affecting kind of the way that bands and artists are engaging with the sort of video game world?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, the importance hasn't changed. I mean, you know, clearly audio music has got huge importance in film, TV, video games. So I don't think that's changed. I think what's changed a little bit more is people's perceptions. I think, you know, you're beginning to see slightly higher budgets for some of these games and scores. You know, I mean, you should probably get about 10% of an entire, in the perfect world, the entire production budget should be on the audio and the music, at least, you know, because it adds so much to the experience. But just going back to the sort of composition route, I totally agree. You know, that with the interactivity of music scores and composers having to score in a non-linear fashion, knowing that the stems are going to be triggered off by what the player's doing at a particular time, is a very different discipline. And I think that's one of the reasons you're getting a lot of the Hollywood composers at the top of their game, wanting to get into video games, because it's a new challenge for them. It's a new way of writing. I remember years ago I was in New York. I, you know, had a meeting with Philip Glass's agent, and it turned out he really wanted to get involved in video games, and luckily I had a good chance to work with him a few years later. But you know, that's definitely going on. And similarly, when you're looking at commercial music and bands and artists, yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of bands that spend time on the road touring, that in some cases will have a console on the tour bus. So, you know, they're kind of inherently gamers anyway, and got a lot of time to spend in between towns and cities and the touring. And they've always kind of been into it. I guess the main shift I've seen over the last few years is, I think the labels and the publishers beginning to also realize the power, not only sort of through the remuneration, but also, you know, I mean, let's take a very obvious game like Grand Theft Auto, that will, I mean, the current game, I think, has done something like, latest figures, but I think last time I heard it was something ridiculous, like 36 million units. Okay, you know, soundtrack has got probably, from memory, 150 to 200 songs on it. So, you know, you're one of many, but it's such an immersive experience. I was telling the guys here when we were chatting backstage that, you know, the two previous games, I'd kind of got slightly bored, you know, go to A, pick up parcel, go to B, you know. And when this one got advertised, and I think I got slightly taken in by the small faces on the original trailer, I was like, oh yeah. I mean, those guys always, when they release the initial trailers, they really, really get, you know, they start to whet your appetite really early. They know exactly what they're doing. And as more information started to drip, and oh right, 3 characters into like, I was like, you know what, I'll give this one a go. And I had those amazing gaming moments on it that were intrinsically connected to music, you know. So I remember completing the first heist that you can do in the game, you know. And I was driving off on my motorbike, and the radio station on the motorbike came on, and it was Chicago, If You Leave Me Now. And I just had it, the sunset was setting, and I just robbed a bank, and, you know, the track from my youth came on, and, you know, it totally immersed me in the game. So I think a lot of bands, you're mentioning Skrillex, you know, releasing new music via a game. Actually worked with you guys and Skrillex 2 years ago on a racing game, actually. We had a couple of tracks. I like to think that maybe he decided to release his game off the back of the experience on that game that we worked each other on. Probably not. So yeah, it's just much cooler, and I think people are beginning to realise the real benefits.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose, well, you talked about sort of Chicago at the sort of existing bands, but I think I'm really interested in the sort of the emerging acts and how this sort of change in audio and the sort of impact that that's having on sort of breaking bands and sort of the talent development side. And Stephan, perhaps you could talk a little bit about, you know, do you think that artists' careers can sort of be gamified, and sort of what, sort of where we are now in terms of audio and games, what impact that's sort of having on talent development for sort of bands at the early stage of their career, advances and marketing, or in both? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly the case that there are certain bands and acts that have a sound, or maybe you know, suit the gaming demographic very well, although I mean, I understand it's quite narrow to say the gaming demographic, because there are several, I suppose. But like, for instance, Flume, very popular, very good sound like that, and maybe not that well known outside, you know, to the broad mainstream market, like on radio or the other places. I also remember very recently having a meeting with a newly signed artist who's only just now emerging in the UK, and so he has already been asked to, no, he's actually completed a recording of his one of his songs in Simlish for The Sims. Then, and that is, I was surprised that it would come that early actually in his career. So it's definitely something that everyone is very aware of, how much a game can do, and to make sure that you're actually in there to have that build the artist with the audience.
And in terms of, I suppose, sort of a little bit about the kind of the royalty collection, or we talked a little bit before about sort of the copyright side of things. I mean, do you think, Sergio, maybe you could talk about this a little bit in terms of how, you know, if where are in the current landscape where we are now, is that kind of changing the way that deals are done, and the sort of royalties versus sort of advances and things like that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. In my experience, and there will be differing, but generally what I've seen over the last 14 years is music, game, there will be royalties attached to it. Non-music games, generally buyouts, and the budgets will vary hugely. You know, having worked on small iOS apps where the budget for the entire game, a little bit like yours, you know, you're talking tens, maybe 100,000 tops, as opposed to the console games where, I mean, these days, tens of millions in the current gen, similar with the previous. So that stuff hasn't really changed too much. I guess where the changes really go on are sort of where you get different formats. So, you know, as I think I mentioned before, you know, the last gen kind of started moving into the digital world a little bit more. So, you know, whereas before I would have bought my singing game. I've been working the last 3 or 4 years on a singing game called Let's Sing, that's released internationally, and actually there's a Spanish-specific version over here. So, you know, on the disc it's relatively easy. You know, you've got the mechanical rights. You know, you've got the sync rights, in inverted commas, no real such thing, but the bundle of rights that you need to put music to picture. All of a sudden in the digital world, where you are downloading a song for Guitar Hero, for SingStar, for Let's Sing, whatever. You know, there's a transmission in that download. There's a broadcast in that download. So all of a sudden, you've got a public performance royalty in that download everywhere in the world except the US, who don't legally recognize a performance in a download. If it's a stream, so you're listening to the game trailer off a website that's streaming through, there's a public performance royalty that will go in that. So all of a sudden, just by purely changing the formats that we're releasing in, you've then got new rights that you need to consider. And you know, it's and particularly in the digital world, and you'll confirm this for me, you know, trying to do any kind of pan-territorial licensing in the digital world is a nightmare. I mean, it's you know, just about to a pan-European deal through the PRS with some catalogs now, but it's very difficult. So essentially, you end up getting to a stage where you're having to do deals in every country with each of the societies, and the sad thing is, I've got an old colleague of mine that I worked with at PlayStation, who, after she left, she did a startup and came up with a very, very cool game that basically gamified being a fan, like an Uber fan. And actually, I mean, built some amazing gameplay around essentially something that was about music that didn't use any music because of the perceived nightmare that I had to go through when we worked together on SingStar. And I kind of found that a little bit sad in that, okay, yes, you do get these Uber fans of music, but ultimately, when you become a fan of a band, you know, whoever they are, boy band, girl band, you know, your favorite group, it's the music at the core of it that you kind of got into it. Yeah, you might fancy Harry Styles, and you know, you might sort of like a couple of the band members, but it's ultimately about the music, and I think it's a terrible shame that people are kind of being put off because of the state. It's the digital world in particular. It's
well, that's
very.
The thing. I mean, you know, the sort of the worry of, you know, music being squeezed out for the sake of other things or things like that. I mean, and also I sort of wonder if we're, you know, the rise of kind of app games, and is that, you know, though games that are costing very little for the consumer versus your traditional kind of box games and what they cost. You know, what impact is that going to then have on, you know, the drip down of kind of royalties and the sort of the revenue that composers and you know, media composers and publishers and everyone are getting because of that. You know, I think that's and Joan, I mean, how do you think that how is that kind of affecting things your side on the sort of development side in terms of sort of app versus the sort of big releases on the sort of composition side?
Well, from my point of view, we can establish two kind of things. First, we are looking for quality of the product, quality of the game, to deliver the best experience possible to the user, to the consumer. But at the same time, some kind of interrelationships between music composers, band of musics, makes that the video game, it's in reality a new channel of promotion. So we are taking advantage, on one side, delivering the best experience to the player. For example, Just Dance contains a lot of licensed music from well-known bands and composers of music. But on the other side, this is a new channel to deliver to a broad audience these songs, to take advantage of new targeting audiences and spread the communication of music and of your work. So I think it's very positive on every side on the industry, in the music industry and in the video game industry.
And how have the sort of briefs, you've talked a little bit about what you're looking for and how that's changed. How have the sort of briefs changed that you're sort of putting out? How are you kind of thinking about the audio that you're using in a game? How has that kind of changed?
Well, audio can be used in a different ways of form in a video game, because the problematic of things is that there are absolutely new types of games. For me, a good example of that, it's the music game type, because it's more related to have good music. We have more relationship with bands, with composers, with songwriters, etc. But on the other hand, it's very important to have the normal storytelling, for example, apply it in an action-adventure game. But the conclusion is that music, it's super important nowadays in every form of game, and the relationship with composers, musicians is very important to have a good product and to achieve the best quality. In the past, maybe we had examples of that. For example, Moonwalker from Michael Jackson. It was a very good example of how music was important for a song like Michael Jackson producer. And nowadays, it's more frequent, this kind of relationship between the industrial music and the video games industry.
And so could you come in here maybe as well and talk about the changing briefs and how that's impacting what you do?
Yeah, changing briefs. Yeah, usually with me it's some new functionality slipped craftily into a document I've seen a million times. Hang on a minute, what do you mean you're going to do that? You can't do that. Yeah, I guess the obvious with with the current gen are lots of this sharing, functionality. It's kind of a next step from the last gen, but for example, on the singing games that I work on, we've been working on Wii and some of the last gen up to now, but obviously with the current gen out, there's a real appetite to go cross-platform, like Just Dance have done, and there's some really exciting new gameplay that the developers have come up with, but again, challenging. And I kind of hark back to PS2 to PS3 on the SingStar for me, because that was a year where I spent, I'd spent a number of years before that having to get to know the societies in different territories. So, for example, SGAI over here, even on the disc. Whereas in the UK, we deal directly with the music publishers, the PRS, MCPS don't collect anything. Over here, the SGAI collects quite a large portion of the sync fee they'll collect for the mechanical, and then the publisher will collect a small little share that'll be for the sync. It all sort of flows through in the end anyway. But sort of that's a big change, and in every territory, kind of slightly different nuances. As soon as we started doing the whole digital thing, it was then going to meet up with the indies and the majors and trying to negotiate a deal based on a bit of game code around one song that you could download to play guitar to sing to dance to. And I guess the opening gambits with everyone I spoke to was, well, we get this percentage on iTunes. It was this, oh, it's digital. Well, yeah, we know digital. We sell our audio on digital, and this is where we get it. It's like, well, it's actually no different to the disc. Mm-hmm. The distribution method is different, but it's the same game. It's the same bit of code. Yes, I would argue probably individual songs or song packs of 3, you're picking that song as opposed to, but I think to suggest that, a record label that will get 60, 70% of a download on iTunes, that they should be getting that, or, but these are the challenges that you come across whenever there's a big shift in technology, and the thing that I found has been very useful to get it. We've always been very open. So, at PlayStation, we got the copyright owners, the indies, all the sync guys, majors to come in. We probably used 2 or 3 times a year. We presented them the games that we had coming out over the next 2 quarters. Really early on, look, this is stuff we've got coming on. Have a look at it. This is what we've got. Have a look at your catalogs. And there was this kind of open dialogue. And I've always found that keeping this open dialogue, looking at it as a partnership, rather than licensor and licensee. You know, clearly there are benefits of both parties if you really work together, and it's not rocket science. I mean, it's not rocket science to realize that one of the songs on your game from a particular artist whose album is coming out in the same month as the game's coming out, and they might be touring, that there's actually, if you put the marketing and the product managers together from both sides, that actually there's some really other exciting things that you can explore on the back of it. But, you know, you get caught up. You know, I think the music companies are releasing records, you know, we've got to do that. Games are releasing games. They get caught up in their own, but it's actually very easy just to get both together, and it's not rocket science. You can get some really exciting stuff done.
Yeah, and I suppose on the sort of publishing side, to bring you in, Stephan, I mean, do you sort of agree with all of that? And I mean, particularly if we're sort of, you know, we'll take it as read that, yes, you know, this is a great kind of new platform and extra stream of revenue for bands and for artists. And, you know, so, but can bands write for games? I mean, do you think that's kind of where we are, that bands are kind of really placing a lot of importance on that at the moment? I mean, I know you work more sort of on the film, but, you know, can the same be said for that?
Is the question, can bands write for games?
Yeah.
I suppose that comes down to, is there a certain sound or a certain kind of song that works for games? And I think that is probably a little bit more difficult than for advertising, because for advertising everyone's looking for the same few things. I think with games it's a little bit broader. I mean, in terms of trying to write a song that will suit games very well. I think Sergio, looks like you want to say
well,
something.
no, I mean, you're already seeing it. You know, the Destiny. You know, Paul McCartney co-scored. You know, there are a lot of people from the music industry getting in on there, and you know, from anywhere from scoring to remixing. You know, I think there's an appetite. Yeah, it's very different. I think, you know, an adventure, action adventure type game where typically there's a score behind it. You know. And when I say score, let's not get too hung up on, oh, because it's a score, it's got to be all orchestral and epic and big. I mean, that's one side of it. You know, I mean, a good example on the Driver, was it Parallel Lines? Or no, it was The Last Driver, where, you know, the company that I used to work at, you know, we scored all the Driver games, and we did all the music supervision on all the Driver games. And on the last one, you know, our in-house composer wrote the theme for the game, like he'd done for all the others previously. But then there was, you know, we did some collaborations, so we got Uncle to then remix, and you know, so there was original score, but then kind of reworked. You know, I still go back to a project that I still loved that when I was working on it. I worked on The Getaway, which was PlayStation's Lock, Stock, Two Smoking Barrels type, gritty gangster set in London, 40 square kilometres of London, photorealistically created in the game, so you could drive in central London, and you could drive past our offices, and you know, and the creative that we did for that was, let's get a Lalo Schifrin, David Axelrod type score. Type score that you'd too much of this going on. I've been in Spain too long. My Latin's coming out now.
You need one of these.
I do need one of those. Yeah. So the idea was, you know, we've kind of got this gritty kind of gangster thriller. You know, there's lots of films like that in the 70s that came out where Axelrod and Schifrin wrote the scores. Big fan of all their stuff, and clearly, you know, we couldn't get those guys in there to do it because, you know, we were then gonna. The idea was the cutscene music was this kind of jazzy, kind of orchestral score, and then the interactive music in game was going to be a little bit grittier. You know, it was set in London, so we were thinking, well, clearly we can't work with Schifrin or Axelrod because we can't then have recording artists, producers to kind of rework stuff using that score because, you know, it's not our copyright to own. So we created our own score, interestingly, actually, with Nimrod. It was the last place I was at. So they did this very cool thing, and then we were thinking, okay, well, where can we take this? Let's find a really cool hip-hop label that's got maybe some affinity to the game. So we're like, okay, Ninja Tune. I mean, you know, very, very key, you know, UK indie labels, been around for a long time, amazing music off there. So we did a deal with those guys, and you know, we got 5 of their acts. We got Diplo, Low Tech Hi-Fi, Amon Tobin, Blockhead, and I forget the 5th one. But anyway, we got a bunch of them, and we allocated each of them. There were 3 characters in the game, and each of the characters had their own theme. So we gave each of the guys sort of select sort of themes to remix, and we gave them the stems to the orchestral jazzy score. And we said use as much or as little as you like on there and create something new for the in-game. So I guess like in a film, you got these score themes that then carried on appearing in different kind of styles of music throughout. So there was a fluidity to the score, and people recognized the melodies for a certain character, from the cutscenes that are a bit jazzier and orchestral all the way to the kind of really gritty hip-hop in there. Then taking it to another level, you know, we were lucky enough to be able to get the UK PR and marketing backing, and now a friend of mine that's working in my old team at PlayStation, who was working in PR and club promotions, yeah, and dealing with a lot of the very cool electronic labels. We got the Ninja guys to do some CDs, you know, sort of branded CDs with the Getaway and with their stuff, with the remixes on. We then got 1,000 set of 3 limited edition 12-inch vinyls, where we got the producers to actually extend the mixes that they'd done for the game for the dance floor, and we gave them VO recordings from the game so they could use that in there. And then we just got it out. We got zonked promotions to get it out. So rather than, you know, Ninja Tune and PlayStation UK come together, people were actually in clubs hearing the extended mixes on the dance floor and then beginning to piece, oh right, hang on a minute, that's a Diplo track, and isn't that from that game? And it was just brilliant, you know. With the remix package went to #1 in the Zub charts in Mixmag, purely from this kind of guerrilla, and it was just great. It was just, for me, it just still stands there as a, you know what, if you can get different parts of the company to kind of work together with the record side, there's some really exciting stuff you can do.
I mean, that kind of answers, well, leads in very well to my next question, which is kind of what I wanted to talk about, you know, so how do we turn these gamers into music fans, you know? So, Stephan, do you want to maybe come in here?
Turn the gamers into music fans. Well, I should just say, you know, from what we were on before, I totally agree with you, Sergio, on in terms of stuff that is music that is developed like in collaboration with the artists and stuff. What I was saying before was more in reference to how would a band write something that will suit the game so well that it gets picked up and they then get the exposure. Sorry, remind me of the question. That was meant.
How do we make these gamers into music fans? I mean, they probably are, but how do we really capitalize on that as the kind of music industry?
I think it's about being open to, you know, as Sergio says, when they're presenting the upcoming projects, being open to really working closely with the developers and seeing the things that are actually possible, and keeping an open mind to, you know, the developing, deciding which games are developing, so that we're not like blocking something, and in that way not giving the artist these possibilities.
And have you seen that that's happened much more from your side of things now that there is a sort of greater importance on audio in video games?
Oh, I mean, in terms of us wanting or being present to the opportunity to promote our catalog and our acts. I mean, absolutely. So we have dedicated people in our team who work primarily or very much with games, and they're out there, and as Sergio, you will know, you know, they will. And so definitely communicating a lot with the producers and letting them know about the new things that are coming out, so that, you know, they know that whenever they need us, we're right there and we're ready to talk.
And I suppose just before we maybe do some questions, Joan, what do you think the music industry can learn from the games industry? I mean, if anything, or if that's kind of what we're trying to think about, if the relationship is changing, do you think there's things that the music industry can learn from where the games industry is at the moment, or how that's operating?
Yeah, I think that the music industry can learn a lot of video games. For example, I have mentioned it before that there are bands, artists, DJs producing a specific music, album, scoring games. For example, two examples from Levine, the Brazilian DJ, scoring Splinter Cell 3. To, for example, an indie songwriter like Kurt the Pirate, who this girl scored latest Child of Light production. So there are examples of interaction every day in the music industry with video game industry. And for me, I would like to have the possibility to see the technical composition of video games evolving in the way bands and songwriters produce their music. Something like that, for example, Brian Eno and generative music, it's a good example from years ago. But now the technology makes this possibility to spread this field, to make new challenges on composition side. And I think that there are a lot of bands, a lot of musicians from music industry that they are very sensitive to these new possibilities of technology, to these new ways of telling things using video games. And well, in fact, they are musicians and songwriters and like Skrillex that I mentioned before that are producing games.
And Sergio, do you think do you agree with that? Do you think we are, is the music industry kind of adapting to those changes, kind of responding to them and stuff?
Yeah. On the whole, greatly. I think everyone's seen, and I was, having been at two of the big companies within the sort of music genre, I guess 2006 to 2008 was the kind of peak in that whole business, and for part of that I was at Sony at PlayStation, working on SingStar and all the different localized versions, and seeing the royalty statements that were being generated off the back of that. I mean, SingStar was huge all over Europe, Australia, New Zealand, so it wasn't a surprise, but it was like, wow, okay, this is really exciting. And then similarly, then moving over to Activision and seeing the same thing for Guitar Hero, which again, a beast all over the world, really. So yeah, I think that the companies are definitely sort of really eager, and I'm seeing, it's really nice to see more and more people that know each other now. I remember going into a meeting once where there was the recording arm and the publishing arm of the same group. I invited them both in because, well, you know what, and I had to introduce them to each other, and from the same group with a lot of shared copyrights, and it was just, really? You don't know each other already? Surely you guys should be on the phone and, and working together to get your shared copyrights out, and but yeah, things have changed greatly now, so yes.
And I think we'll do some questions in a minute, but two quick questions I wanted you all to answer, which is favourite game and favourite piece of music in a game, or favourite moment with music in a game. Who wants to go first? Stephan first.
Stephan wants to go first. Stephan's going to, well, obviously. I would say maybe not in the game, but the trailer for the new Assassin's Creed with Flume has to be mine. Yeah.
Joan?
For me, a good example of what is music for video game applied to a new gameplay was Masaya Matsuura when he scored the first game of Parappa the Rapper, which is a music game. So for me, a part of the gameplay, which it was very new in this moment, the music was fresh, well produced, it was magic.
Sergio?
Wow, no, there's a difficult
You
one.
can't say Chicago again.
No, I won't actually. There's probably be another one that I think for me as a game and the score was just beautiful, and I think I got slightly surprised and taken aback by how much it affected me, and I loved it. It was actually a PlayStation game that was a download on the PSN called Journey that won a lot of awards, and it just had the most beautiful gameplay anyway. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but you kind of it's not a very long game either. I think you finish it in about 2.5, 3 hours. But it's just this sort of Ewok-looking kind of character in this kind of desert space, and you're really just kind of exploring. And what you don't realize while you're playing is you see other sort of characters are the same, and if you're playing online, those are actually real other players, and you can't really communicate with them. Each character's got these weird little sort of sounds and notes that they make, and essentially you get to the end of it and you realize that any of these people that you've kind of met on the way that you thought might be, you know, just a character in the game, that you might have been helping each other to kind of, you actually realize at the end that it was a real someone else in the world. And the score was just beautiful as well. I mean, it was so unlike the kind of game that excites me. You know, I wasn't shooting anything, I wasn't hacking any zombies to death, I wasn't, you know, shredding away on the guitar. But it was just an absolutely beautiful moment. And I think partly because I knew the team, the music team over in place, they were my colleagues when I was over there. You know, I actually gave Chuck, the audio director over there, a call afterwards just to congratulate. I said, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful what you guys have done with this. So yes, that's probably my favourite gaming moment.
So, any questions? 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 I think there's a mic. Thank you. Chris.
So having worked on the publishing side before a little bit, people always complain about how films run out of money and then try and license some music. Is it fair to say that the music's more integral, more important, or licensed earlier on? Or are you guys just, is it as chaotic, it just sounds good from the stage?
Stephan, do you want to say, Sergio? Who wants to go first? You both look like you want to say something. Stephan, you go first. You go
I'll
first.
Go first. Well, from what I've seen, it's actually it seems more organized on the game side. It is negotiation. If we're talking like every franchise seems to have their kind of standard terms, and if there is negotiation, it is generally on which tier a certain song is in.
Yeah,
Well, is it a top tier? Is it 1, 2, 3? It's not the same as we have lots of films saying, oh, we need this song. We shot the film, the song is already in it. We don't have any more budget, just give it to us cheaply, and that doesn't seem to happen with games, which is very good.
It's a time thing. I mean, I used to get called 14 years ago with, hi sir, this is a consultant the first time around, hi Sergio, yeah, we've got this spaceship sort of wipeout type racing game. Okay, great, yeah. Yeah, we need about 10 tracks for it, and it's going in submission in 3 weeks' time, and it's like, what? Okay, how much money have you got? Oh, yeah, nothing. I mean, beginning to see a lot with apps now, and the smaller games that are running on the freemium models, that are kind of, how do you remunerate an artist on a game that's freemium? You know, they're in-app purchases, but that throws a totally, that's another discussion point, but it kind of feeds in quite well into this. What was the question again? Oh, so yeah, I mean, I do a lot of stuff in advertising now, and I just think by default of the lead times, an action adventure game. I mean, there are some that have been in development for 5 or 6 years. So some that have never actually come out and been canned. So you've just got a lot more time. I think production values have got so much larger that people internally have realized that they need to get people, I remember a time getting called a month before submission. I'm now at a stage where I've had developers coming to me with concept documents, with summaries of a few of the characters, a summary of the plot, and that's about it. Maybe a little bit of a tech demo, and they want to get in right from the onset now. So it's changed a lot. And advertising, it's still very last minute, just by default of the turnaround to shoot an ad. You know, it's so much shorter.
And I mean, do you think, would you agree with that? I mean, at what stage are you sending out the kind of, as you say, the concept or the characters or whatever, at what stage is the music and the audio kind of entering into your kind of world?
Well, it depends on the game, basically, but we can try to deliver a good taste in music, but problem of music in games, and in fact in the rest of industries, I think it's budget to license, budget to produce original music. So budget is sometimes a problem. Of course, there are games that it seems that they have no this problem, like Destiny, but normally it's a constraint to find a good balance with budget and quality music, original or licensed.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anyone else? No? Everyone's very shy. No more questions? Chris, you haven't got another question. Have you got another question?
Come on, Chris.
Another question. So one more, another one. Just leave the mic with him now.
Might we see a return to a royalty-based model in a world of in-app purchases?
In where?
With in-app purchases, might we see a return?
Adverts.
In-app purchasing.
In-app.
Oh,
Sorry.
in-app purchasing.
Might it take you back to a royalty model, given that share of upside is presumably the only thing you're really looking to do as a writer getting involved for the low fees?
Yeah, you know what? I actually, some good friends of mine that were kind of a split-off startup from Freestyle Games, the guys that did DJ Hero 1 and 2 that I worked with a lot, and actually I'd worked with them on a breakdancing game called B-Boy, which was the first game they did when we were at PlayStation. And they had they were self-financing this game. It was freemium model. There was some in-app purchases. You know, they didn't want to go for anyone particularly big. It was electronic music. It was all very cool, quite underground stuff. And in that case, they were quite happy to kind of do a revenue share. That was the way they wanted to do it. Now, you know, depending on who you're dealing with, that might work. I mean, we all know that, and particularly as you get bigger profile, and I have to say, as particularly you get high profile US acts in particular, advance is king. I mean, really, they want the money up front. They want that guarantee. If the game doesn't do well, tough. You know, if you want our piece of music, you've got to do that. And I mean, I understand it. There's been money that's been put in to develop acts and what have you. It makes it a little bit more difficult for some of these, but you know, there is a lot of music out there, and I guess, you know, if you don't need the name on the box, which, to be honest with you, unless it's a music game, you know, I don't think anyone's going to buy Gran Turismo off the back of whether a particular band are on it or off. Now, you know, they will not buy it if a BMW is not, you know, potentially. It's a racing game. It's about the cars, not about the music. Yes, the music adds to the experience, but with the music games, you've got nowhere to go. But equally, I spin that on its head and say, you know, and this is a discussion at the beginning with some of the music companies that are a bit more difficult, was, well, you know what, this isn't just your music. I mean, the developer has created something around your music, a world around your music to enjoy your music, that will have a teenager paying £40 for that game when they won't pay £10 for a compilation album. That, you know, clearly the developers are doing something else around that. And I kind of go back to but in iTunes we get this. It's like, yes, you're selling just your audio.
Yeah.
It's your own product. You haven't had a team of 50 people, artists, designers, programmers, working on this to make your content exciting in these platforms.
Thank you. I think we're going to be nearly out of time. So any quick closing remarks? Stephan, thanks for the questions, Chris. Stephan, any closing remarks before? I think we've literally got like 1 minute, so, or no minutes. Are you shaking your head? 1 minute.
I'll pass it over then too.
Any closing remarks from any of you? Or we can end there.
Probably talked enough, as I usually do.
Any closing remarks?
Well, we are living an exciting period of time, and I think that the future is very promising in the music field, apply it to video games, and we'll see very faster and growing experiences, new experiences that we cannot imagine from the moment, but because technology and, fortunately, art are advancing very fast.
Cool, thank you. Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you very much. Panelists.